Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Horror Inside podcast. Now, we haven't done one of these in a little while, and I just had the thought before we started that it's like, we've all been quarantined or whatever, and we didn't do any podcasts, but we've been doing some other
Yeah.
stuff as we just talked about before. We did some streaming and stuff, which is all good. But I did miss doing podcasts a little bit. But we definitely have a good one to return to. We're talking about the original Silent Hill from 1999 that Brandi had never played before, and we had talked about for years. And I kept telling her, you should play this. It's so good. You should play these. The first one at this point is like the only one that's easily available, which really sucks. But at least it is. So we got it on PS3, PS1 Classics, and Brandi and I played it at the same time. I'm more familiar with the games, obviously, because she's never played them, but not as familiar as I am with like Resident Evil and stuff like that. But it was a lot of fun to play through it for the first time with you, especially because you were blind. So we're going to talk about that, your first initial impressions being blind to it, and my like whole feelings on the game and the series to a certain extent. And funnily enough, as we're recording this, and even I think it was the day after we beat the original Silent Hill was trending again on Twitter.
I know, Twitter, yeah.
Not
like,
for
damn,
anything
I don't want to be spoiled, though.
I know, I told Brandi to avoid that, because even though it apparently is just DLC for Dead by Daylight, which, cool that they're doing something with it, but again, I personally feel like that's just crumbs Konami's throwing out at you, and they probably had nothing to do with the development of that. They were just like, you want to use these characters? Great, use them.
Right.
So
instead of putting the games on PS4, which would make them easily accessible to somebody like me that doesn't have them.
Yeah, we're definitely we're going to talk a little bit. Maybe we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the series as it is, because delving into that after we, played the first one and, wanted to see how easy it would be for Brandi to get the other ones, because I own them. I owned them for years, and they're not that easy to get. But we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit. It's funny, I told you, we realized that, wow, there's a company that is worse than Capcom. Can you imagine that?
I know. I mean, at least Capcom, to Capcom's credit, they may be, in our humble opinion, running the series into the ground at this point, but at least they've always made their classic games accessible. I mean, I was telling Dylan earlier, I was saying this to you, because it's true. It's funny. It's like between our two systems, between PS3 and PS4, we basically have all the Resident Evil games, and even some spin-offs like the Chronicle games are available on PS3. It sucks like Outbreak and maybe some other more obscure spin-offs like Dead Aim and stuff aren't easily accessible, but hey, the whole entire series as a whole, the main series, is available. And it's sad that like Konami just sort of, I mean, obviously we're going to get way more into it, but it does suck that they sort of brushed aside, I feel like, a series that was really popular. Well, I mean, when people think survival horror, the main one I guess that pops in their head is Resident Evil, because they were the first one to coin the term and sort of set the bar for survival horror.
Yeah.
But Silent Hill, you say, what was that thing that you said that I thought it was like an analogy or something for like survival horror between like Silent Hill and Resident Evil?
I always thought that Resident Evil and Silent Hill were like the king and the queen of the genre.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
But this is about Silent Hill. We always stumble upon talking about Resident Evil, which I'm sure we'll do again.
We will. It's hard not to when they're compared a lot too, but
I guess if you just wanted to jump into the original game, there's lots I want to talk about with that. And again, I want you to talk a lot too, because again, you were blind to it for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Silent Hill is like, I think it was, I don't know if it was made as a result of like a reaction to Resident Evil, but it definitely, they are compared a lot, but it definitely is its own thing.
Yes,
Silent Hill has like some moments of B-movie, but the story's a lot darker and a lot more serious than Resident Evil, which I do like. But so yeah, I guess the first game, just the basic premise of it, which we'll get into spoilers later, I'm sure, is
spoiler alert.
Harry Mason and his daughter Cheryl are driving to and I explained this to Brandi, because I think at one point I want you to talk a little bit about, we were playing it, and I think a couple times you were a little confused about maybe what was real and what wasn't.
Right, yeah. I've always thought, like, again, being completely blind to Silent Hill, I've seen, I shouldn't say I mean, blind to, like, story elements, sure, because I didn't, but I have seen gameplay, people on YouTube and stuff playing Silent Hill. So I guess I shouldn't say complete, because people are always wanting to be specific about that. But story-wise, I never, sat and watched a whole playthrough or played the games myself. So I was always confused if Silent Hill was like a real town, like people would just reference it in real life, like it was a real place, or
Mhm.
it was like this ghostly town that would just appear for certain people. Like I was very like, again, and it sounds probably like to some like fucking huge Silent Hill fan that stumbles on this are probably gonna be like, what? But like, again, to me, being super blind to it, I just had like certain things that I thought, and then I'm glad like you were able to, and I will say, like, I think my first time playing it too, I was a little confused even toward, like, even at the end, once everything sort of came around and came together, there were still certain things. So thank God I had you to explain certain things. But yeah, I always thought that it was just like like a ghost town that would just like appear for
Right.
certain, but it wasn't real. So it's interesting that it was. And didn't you say it's like a resort town in the games it's supposed to
Yeah.
be, or, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
And the movie kind of changed that, which I much prefer how it's presented in the games. But yeah, Silent Hill in the games is just a normal resort town, and it looks like a normal town to most people.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
whereas the characters we play are usually drawn to Silent Hill for some reason.
Right. Because the evil
And
preys upon them or something.
yeah, somebody put it that way once. I read, and like saying that Silent Hill, the town, is like a predator that preys on these people for specific reasons. Um, and
That's very interesting.
in this game, it's I guess this game's a little different as far as, because all this other sequels, generally speaking, Silent Hill, what they're seeing and the monsters they're seeing and all of that is very personal to them. Like it's their own
Right.
personal version. So like I told Brandi, all the creatures are usually symbolism, something to do with that character. But whereas the first game, and what they're dealing with, whereas the first game, it's not, the town isn't presenting itself to Harry specifically. Like the
Right.
creatures that he's seeing are more reflective of Alessa and
Oh
Cheryl.
yeah. Yeah.
So like, yeah, I told you some of the creatures, like the Cray children, which were a pain in the ass. I remember
I
replaying.
know, and they're
They were,
creepy too.
I know, they were just like hard. They had a reach and they were hard to get away from. Um,
I know, and if there were like two and you were kind of like when you went into a room and you were kind
you
of
wanted
cornered,
to
they would
use a
just grab
pipe
you.
or a melee, but it didn't work
Yeah.
very well when
You
you're
have to use the gun for
cornered.
that.
Yeah, but they're supposed to symbolize the classmates that bullied Alessa. But yeah,
I
I
know, it's
guess,
very interesting.
yeah, but I guess just your perspective, like, as the story in the game was unfolding, like, what did you? I know you said we were playing it, you were really enjoying it, but like to say it again for
Yeah.
this, like as it was unfolding, what were like your initial thoughts about maybe the characters and some of the story?
Well, I remember when it opened again. Going, I would say that I was completely blind to the story, at least. Like I knew, the only thing I knew was like Harry Mason was like the main character. That's like probably all, and that he met a
Right,
cop. Like that's like that was me going into this game.
Sybil,
And then
yeah.
there's that, yeah, Sybil. I didn't know her name at that time. I just was like, oh, doesn't he meet like a female cop in like a
Mm,
restaurant or something? Like that was all I really, because again, I've watched bits and pieces of like people on YouTube that I just enjoy their commentary and them playing games. I've watched like you and I always talk about like Two Best Friends, for example. So I
mm,
probably, I've seen bits and pieces of each Silent Hill game, but never as a whole. And I knew no spoilers, which was like story wise at least, which was good. So
yeah.
going into it, I was like, oh, and like I know they played, which I thought was really cool, that they played like that little cutscene sort of movie thing at the
Oh
very beginning with
yeah,
that
that's cool to
music.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool to mention because I always like how this game, like again, Resident Evil, for example, or any video game, kind of opens with a cutscene that is establishing the characters in a
Yeah.
very normal way, where this is
Right.
just kind of like a vignette of the characters. It gives you hints here and there, but you won't really fully understand what is happening in that until you like play the
Yeah,
whole
until you
thing.
play. And like thinking back, like, and again, you even said we're gonna probably bring Resident Evil up a lot just because it's inevitable at this point for us, and I think it's
Hmm.
fair to bring it up in a game when we're talking about another survival horror game. But like when I think of RE3 and I think of like before the menu comes on and it does that dun 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 dun, dun music and you see like
Yeah,
Nemesis and the character. So Resident Evil definitely has that too, which sets the tone for a Resident Evil game, which is awesome. But I think the Silent Hill one was really effective because I was like, of course I was completely confused like at first watching and I was just like, seeing all these characters and different things flash by. But I thought the music, and I want to definitely, eventually talk about the music because holy shit, it's so good,
Definitely, yeah.
obviously. But the music, it was just very like intriguing immediately as soon as we started up the game. Like it was one of them things where I mean, obviously I was confused. I didn't know who everybody was and what exactly was happening. But then I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then as we
Hmm.
started to play, I loved like. I mean, to talk about the characters, I always knew again who Harry Mason was. He's obviously the character you play as. And I think I even may have remembered he was looking for his daughter. I don't know if I fully remember there was like a car crash and everything, but I remembered him being in Silent Hill for the reason to like look for his daughter. And then when you meet, I think don't right in the beginning of the game, you have like a nightmare type thing and you get like, because remember I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die already right in the beginning. And you
Yeah,
didn't say anything, which was so
I
funny because
didn't.
of course you
Yeah,
did. Yeah. And then like, obviously he wakes up in like, it's like is it like a bar or coffee shop or
it's like
something?
a
I don't remember.
diner. Yeah.
Yeah, Diner, yeah. And then you meet Sybil, who I don't know why, I just really like her. And I even liked her in the movie, which we'll talk about
Hmm.
later, but I
Yeah.
really liked her in the game. And and again, I know even in the game I was doing this, and I'm glad you didn't get annoyed with me, Dylan, but every time they said something that remotely reminded me of Resident Evil, I would just quote Resident Evil. Because she, he eventually like found a radio at one point, or somebody said something about a radio, and I was like, oh, great, the radio's out, like Leon says in R8. I just kept like comparing them, I guess. Not really comparing them, but just like referencing the Resident Evil while we were playing it. But they did kind
Right.
of remind me of like when Leon and Claire meet, although obviously it's different, the dynamic between the characters, but it was interesting because she was the cop lady this time and he was
Hmm.
looking for his daughter. So they're the first two characters you're introduced to. I liked both of them obviously right away. I don't know why I also like Harry. Like I feel like some people, and again, I don't want to offend Silent Hill fans. I don't know my lore or anything else about any of the other games, but from my again first perspective going into it, I feel like some people could interpret Harry as being like sort of just a minute like he's just the playable guy, but for whatever reason, I don't know why. I really
Right.
liked him. Remember I also said this is so stupid, but it's just I mean, hey, this is my impressions of the game. Remember in the CG cutscenes, obviously not the blocky in-game cutscenes, but the CG ones, which were actually really well done, by the way, too, for PS1. And the face models were amazing. You and I were both talking about that. But remember, I was like,
Yeah.
it's so funny how Harry in the CG cutscenes, he's pretty attractive. Whereas like I would not have said that about any of the PS1 Resident Evil character. I mean, Jill's fine in RE3. We said that like she's a little
Yeah.
generic, but she's pretty in 3. But I mean, I always kind of people are also going to hate me for this, make fun of like the way Claire looks in the CG cutscenes of 2, and obviously Leon with his fishy lips and bright red hair. So it was just
Or
interesting to
Sherry with her
see.
big fat face,
Yeah,
comparing
her
it
bee stung face.
to
That's so.
Cheryl,
Yeah, who
just
looks
looks like a cute
fine.
little girl.
Yeah, she looked fine, and like Harry looked good. Like everybody looked. I mean, obviously the
Dahlia's
in-game
fucking
cutscenes are.
creepy.
She's really creepy. If we're gonna go, I mean, do you want to like go through each character first and then just talk about like atmosphere and gameplay, or like whatever structure you want to? Because I can talk about Dahlia. She fucking creepy.
Oh, there's one thing I did want to bring up about Sybil, which I don't know if I explained or if you kind of got while we were playing it, is that I don't know if she was drawn to the town for a reason either, or if she just unluckily stumbled upon Harry and Cheryl. Because in the
Oh.
game, and I always loved, I know this having played it a lot and read into it, that I really like that. Remember, there's a scene where Harry's talking to her about seeing the monsters and the fog and everything, and
Oh
she's just
yeah.
like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because she
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
see any of the monsters. So to her, for the most part, I think to her, the town is, like I
Is
said, she
normal,
sees it pretty normal.
which is
Um,
very interesting.
or she might be in, I don't know, but I just love that it kind of helps further the, like I said, when you weren't quite sure what was real, what was actually happening. I
Right.
love that they put those two together, and she just literally has no idea what he's talking about. And she has a really cool line that I always thought was really creepy in that same scene. I don't know if you remember, but she said that she said she saw a little girl, I guess, in the fog. So I guess she sees the fog. She sees that world maybe.
Right.
But she said that she saw a little girl, probably Alessa, not Cheryl, even though we'll get into those two later.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember, but she said she saw a girl like run away, and then like she just saw the girl, like she said she was like floating on air, which I always thought was
Oh,
really
I do remember
creepy.
that, which is
Because for
eerie, yeah.
Sybil, she's seeing like the end of the road, but Alessa's
Right.
keep moving, or maybe it's Alessa's powers and she's literally floating over the gap.
Oh, that's creepy. Yeah, I do kind of remember. See, you might have to remind me of certain lines and things because obviously I've only
Mm,
played it once. But I now that you've said that, because I remember when she said that, I think I even said like out loud like, oh, that's creepy, because
right.
like I don't know that like I think again like you were talking about how deep, especially in comparison, and again, no hate towards Resident Evil. Obviously, I'm like one of the biggest Resident Evil nerds, so like, but obviously comparing the two, it's funny that like Resident Evil is they're both their own thing. Obviously, I think it's fair to compare them in a certain way though, because they both are like they
They're
were
the
like the
giants of
staples
the
for
yeah
survival horror. Yeah,
the
and
genre.
yeah, and they're different obviously enough, which is awesome, which sets them apart. But then there's also some similarities. But I do like how you said, because I completely agree with it, that Resident Evil, you and I love the lore and the story and the characters so much of Resident Evil, like so much that in fact that's why we don't really like 7 because it strayed so much. Like we adore those characters and that story. On the other side of that though, it is a lot more campy, which fits for Resident Evil though. The whole zombie
Right.
thing, everything. Resident Evil just works because it's perfect. It's awesome. It was perfect at one point, so it works for that. But I do love how Silent Hill is completely like like you said. There are some campy moments, and you can't escape some of the like PS1 dialogue and voice acting of that time. It's just the way. Even though I think everybody did a really good job in this game, there are obviously some moments where you're just like, huh, okay, PS1 game,
Yeah,
but it
I
never
always thought.
takes you out of it ever. And it's like the story. Well, you can go in a second. Sorry, I just wanted to say the story
No, it's
is
okay.
so deep. I think
Hmm.
for a PS1 game, it's so unique to have a story that's that layered and deep and almost, like I said, a little bit confusing, I think, for a first time player. But I think it's once everything comes together, you're like, holy shit, like it was very deep for, I feel like, a PS1 game.
Hmm.
Like, and very dark. Even it's a horror game obviously, but I think for its time it was very like the subject matter and everything in it, the atmosphere even was very dark, and I loved that. So anyway, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say that, but you can continue, or if you had a thought on that. But I do like that. That's where it does kind of stand by itself versus Resident Evil, which I like how different they are. I don't want them to. I
Hmm.
don't want to play a repeat of Resident Evil. Obviously, I would. And remember, I
Right.
always said to you, I always was scared that. Well, first of all, I was scared it was going to be really hard, which I definitely want to talk about that too, like the difficulty, all that stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but I also thought it was going to be just like a copycat of Resident Evil, and of course, if it was that, I would not have enjoyed this game because I would have just kept going, they're trying to be Resident Evil, or oh my god, this is so trying to. And even though there are similarities in terms of gameplay and just like some of maybe the style, they're so completely different things, and I love that.
Hmm.
So it was never a copy of Resident Evil, as like my cynical mind may have thought at one point.
Right. No, it definitely made a point to set itself so far apart from Resident Evil. Yeah, I think a lot of the dark elements in the story are really great. And again, that's what kind of sets. Again, you know nothing about really the sequels except for
Right.
you know that James is the main character in two, but you really know nothing else
Yes.
about him. And then you know
I know
some
he's
other
looking for his
things.
wife, and that's literally it.
Yeah, yeah. But
So
like
I'm
on like
very
the
excited to maybe play that eventually, but we'll get
yeah,
into that more too.
but like on like the darkness of like the story and the characters like in the series in general. But
Yeah.
this game also has some really fucked up moments when you really think about it. But like, what I love about the Silent Hill franchise is that I vaguely said this to you about in two that there's
Hmm.
characters in that or that there's that game touches upon something that or certain things that are like never ever brought up in like a video game story, like but it's a
Hmm.
real world thing and it's really messed up and it's like
Right.
but we'll get into that once we can play two.
Right.
But certain dark elements in this, which I always thought
Hmm.
was fucked up, and I guess from this we can then move to I guess Dahlia and Alessa.
Oh yeah, because I think I know
Just,
what you're gonna say.
just, well, just the fact that she totally fucking burned her daughter alive, and it's
Yeah.
kind of
That's
vague
fucked
as
up.
to whether it's intentional or not. But I mean, it is in my mind, like,
Right.
because her whole goal, she wanted to use her daughter to birth the cult's god,
Right.
and the fact that there's like, and there's so many different versions of Alessa, like Cheryl and Alessa are like the same person. And then
Yeah.
at the end, you see, like, because the whole game you keep seeing wheelchairs around, and then at the end, you see this weird, like, figure, like, almost
Yeah,
hooded
that was
in a
creepy.
wheelchair. And
Yeah.
that was also Alessa. That was the adult Alessa that lived in some reality that, you know, she was
Yeah.
burned alive and she was just being kept alive. Like, and she's, like, just grew up like that. Even Lisa in those videotapes that we find, she says because she took care of, she's the nurse that takes care of Alessa. She even
Right.
said in one of the videos, what is keeping this child alive? Like, there's no reason
Yeah.
why this child should still be alive given what she suffered through.
Yeah, that dark story, like that's like dealing with like like it really was dealing with
Hmm.
like I know it's a horror game, but it was really dealing with like really deeply like scarring type. That I was like when we first, well, Dahlia, first of all, let me just talk about that bitch is creepy as hell looking. I don't know like how they came up with her face or modeled her face back then, but like she's really creepy. But
She
it's
is,
weird
and I.
because I feel like whenever we ran into her, at first when we ran into her and she was talking all
Mhm.
culty and bullshitty, I was like, oh, she's probably a villain or whatever. But then we would run into her later on and she was like giving you like clues to help you, and she was like, you have to defeat them, like talking about, I guess, the monster. I don't know. And like she was like being really vague. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
is she actually just like a crazy cultist, but she's actually helpful? I remember I said that at one point and you were just, again, you didn't spoil anything, but you were just like, I don't know.
I know. I said certain other things I remember we showed each other in the past and like movies or whatever, and sometimes I feel like I've kind of said something and then like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. So I was
I
very
do that sometimes
silent.
too.
I was very silent
Yeah.
in this playthrough, just so you didn't.
Did
I
you say
didn't want to.
silent on purpose?
Yes,
Is that why you went out? Anyway.
but yeah, no.
Um,
The more I think about it, and then we'll also. One of the things I want to talk about when we talk about the movies is obviously the changes that I don't like.
oh yeah.
I love Dahlia in this game. She might be.
Yeah, she's so creepy.
Maybe she's like a cliche, fanatical, crazy religious person or whatever, but I really
Right.
like it for more reason than one. I think she's really creepy. Her voice
I
actor,
do.
again, say what some people say, this game also has bad voice acting, but in a different way than Resident Evil, whereas I
No.
kind of feel like it's off because they're not always, sometimes they I said at one point, they kind of talk like Enrico does, like his like long pause
Oh,
before he goes,
pauses.
yeah.
Yeah.
In this, that's so they talk
uh,
in a very unnatural way, which I feel like
well,
maybe was even
that's just a
cut up in
result
like
of
the
that's
post.
just
But
because
I
of the PlayStation though. That wasn't like the
right,
voice
but I was gonna
actors.
say
That was
on
the
that, I
PS1
think
era.
whatever reason it was for, I think it works for this game because it adds to that
Right.
weird, like off, like this isn't right
That's
kind of
true.
thing.
No, that's
Like
true.
their delivery and whatever, and like Dahlia. I wish I knew some of
Dahlia's
these
creepy.
voice actors' names off the top of my head, but I don't, unlike Resident Evil. But
Right.
her voice actor is really fucking creepy, and
Yeah.
a lot of the time, again, you have no idea, honestly, what what the fuck she's talking about half the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was
Well,
one in particular, it was right at the end when she's like electrocuted by the god or whatever, and she's like
mm,
burnt, she dies. Her
right.
fucking laugh, she's cackling for like 20 seconds and like just laughing, and
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just,
yeah, I
I love
remember.
that. I love that moment because she's just, and I want to talk about her whole design. I always say it's so weird and off, and why is she dressing like that? She's got like a robe and like a little thing over her head, like a
Yeah, like a
shawl or whatever, which
nun
is kind
thing.
of
Yeah.
normal. But then
Yeah.
she's like barefoot and she has this weird out of place black and red tie, which I love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you kept pointing because I was at first I was just looking at how creepy, because I really think, especially obviously in the CG cutscenes, her face is very like
Uh-huh.
I couldn't take my eyes because she's just creepy looking. There's just something like, I don't know if it was like she's got like it, from what I remember of her face, like she's got like these like dark circles like around her eye. Like she just looks really like creepy and off-putting
Right.
to me.
Oh, and
So
somebody
I
said
kept
once,
staring at her and I was just like, whoa.
I think it was the Game Den, Film Den Dina, which we also really like
Yes.
her video. She's into Silent Hill like we're into Resident Evil. I also love Silent Hill, but I'm not as
As
much as she
much.
does. She's really
Right.
into the lore and stuff. But I think she said in one of her videos that Dahlia is supposed to be 40 years old in that game, and she just
Oh wow.
looks like way older.
I know she's so creepy, and like I think her design is perfect. And yeah, but it's funny because I kept looking at her face, like I wasn't looking at her whole outfit initially when especially because I was just like, wow, she's so creepy looking. And then you were like, look at look at the tie that she's randomly wearing. And I was like, what? And then when I noticed it, I was like, whoa, that's so weird. Like her whole design is very, like,
Yeah.
you again, you said like she could be considered like a cliche, rambling religious fanatic or cult leader, whatever. But she's unique in that, like, why the tie? Like it's so
And the
random,
bare
but somehow
feet.
it works for her.
She's
And
not
yeah, and
wearing
she runs
shoes.
around Silent Hill with bare feet. It is she's a very well designed, creepy
Yeah,
ass like
she's
character,
well
definitely.
designed, and I think she's really well performed for what they
Yes,
wanted the
I
character
agree.
to be. And then, unless there's anything else you want to say on Dahlia, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I just really love her as a villain. She's one of
Well,
my
like the
favorite
Carrie
villains.
comparison, which is
Yeah,
interesting
well,
as hell.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, but like we wanted to like talk a little bit about Alessa and try like that whole thing where she's.
Yeah.
I feel like you were maybe confused, and I don't know how you couldn't be because how it's supposed to be like Alessa, the cult
Cheryl.
wanted, yeah, the cult used her to birth the god, burnt her alive, and she had the powers, and that's what caused her to lash out, and I think that's what kind of gave the town the power that it has. So
Right.
she's kind of responsible for, well, her and Dahlia are very responsible for the
Why Silent
events
Hill's evil?
and even like, yeah. Um, but like she did that and then she like split up the good part of her and the bad part of her, and the good part of her became Cheryl, and Harry said that
Mm.
him and his wife just found the baby on the side of the road randomly.
Oh,
They
yeah.
adopted her. Um, so there's the good part of her, the bad part of her, and then just Alessa. And I said this to you, I like that on unlike the movie, I like how Alessa in this is like posed as she's very benevolent. She's not evil. She's like
Right.
being taken advantage of, which is very sad and like
Yeah, and that one scene that it's like I think it's like right before the final boss, so it's like right at the end. So again, we're gonna obviously talk a lot about spoilers, but it was
right
like Harry saw like he
the
just like entered a
ghosts of
room and he saw,
them.
yeah, which I thought that was really cool too. Like sometimes Harry would just walk into a room and instead of it going into like a full CG cutscene or even like he would just be standing there and you would just see like ghostly figures of people doing things. Like there was a point where he walked in and he saw like Dahlia, I guess, doing some type of ritual or some type of thing with other people in a
Right,
different room,
yeah. I think
which was
Dr.
creepy.
Kaufman and like her doctor, and
Oh
she
yeah,
had.
he was
I
there.
was. It just again, Silent Hill was supernatural in a sense, but I always thought her line in that scene where she says, "Oh, we're gonna, we're gonna do a magical spell." And it's like, okay, apparently, I don't know. I just always
That's
thought that was
great though.
funny because it's just. I didn't think of Dahlia as like, oh, she's a witch or whatever, which is not. That's not what she is. But like, just their whole
Right.
line about all of a sudden, oh, we're
Magical
gonna do a
spell.
magical spell.
She's crazy though, so I could. But no, but when Harry walks into that one room and again it's like way towards the end and you see like the ghostly figures I guess of like Alessa and Dahlia and like it's so and I know you had told me that there's references to Stephen King things which is
Oh
awesome.
yeah,
I mean, one of the big ones that I kept seeing repeatedly because I checked the map every 2 seconds was like Bachman Road. Was it
Bachman
Road or
Road.
which was
It's Bachman
awesome.
Road. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's for anyone who doesn't know, that's Stephen King's. He wrote under a pseudonym for a few years because he was writing
Yes.
too many books, and they were like, "We're not publishing all these. This is too much." So he
Well,
came up with the fake name, and
I always thought he did it because he said like he was testing to see like he knew his books were good, but he was like if my name slapped onto it, it'll just sell. He
right,
wanted to
maybe
like
that too.
test and
Yeah,
see, which is
I always heard
interesting
that
and probably
he was
good,
just
but
being so like prolific. They were like, "Okay,
he was
we don't."
churning them out every like
I
fucking
know.
year. I know,
And he was high
but
on
no,
cocaine.
so true though. How do you write a really good novel though, and you don't like? He doesn't even remember. This is such a side note, but again, Stephen King had a lot of influence on Silent Hill. But like, how do you write a whole novel all fucked up on between alcohol and drugs, and you just don't remember it, and yet it becomes really like I read Cujo. And
I
it's
know.
great. How do you even make it make sense?
I guess they
How do you
must have
choose
had
words that make sense if you're all
that book.
fucked up?
Probably must have had a lot of editing by his editors.
Oh, that's true though. Oh my god, that's so funny. Good book though. But anyway,
Yeah, but like, yeah,
um,
on more of the Stephen King connections, I love the Bachman Road thing. I'm sure there's other
I love
things that
that.
I'm not remembering, but the biggest thing, and I told this, I remember this is one thing that I told you for a long time before we played this, that I said that there's two characters in Silent Hill that are very influenced by Carrie and Margaret White, and I really love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And, from Dahlia and her, she's a religious fanatic, and
Yeah.
Alessa is this bullied. She's abused by her
Abused.
mother. She has
Yeah.
similar powers. They both have
Yep.
telekinesis. Alessa has something else on top of that, which allows her to sort of, but like survive and whatever. But
Yeah, and
yeah, like
Dahlia
what
wants to
we're,
like use it. I mean, Margaret was
hmm
scared of it and Carrie, but like it's great how
yeah,
Dahlia's like, one like that scene was really like the one I was talking about where they were like ghostly and
yeah,
and Harry just walked in on it. It was really sad. That was like the first time I was really like, whoa, this is definitely a reference to Carrie because it was really
I
sad how
know.
Dahlia was like, the little girl was like, no, and she was like begging her and didn't want to do
Now that
whatever
I'm
Dahlia was trying to get her to do. I was
Well,
like,
now
that's
that I'm thinking about it, that scene, I think, because like right after that we do run into them and they're kind of more physical, although I think they're
yes,
supposed to be dead. That's one thing that I'm not 100% sure on. Or they're
right,
just trapped in, maybe they're alive and trapped in this world. But the
right,
more I think about it, that scene with them as ghosts, that I think Alessa is saying like, no, I don't want to, and you feel really sad for her.
yeah,
I think that must have been like a flashback in a sense, or Harry seeing it of when Dahlia's first trying to maybe get her to do the ritual or whatever.
Right.
I'm not sure. That's not really clear, but
Yeah,
that's what
because some of I feel like they have to be like flashbacks that Harry's just seeing as he goes, because like that
yeah.
I kept getting, yeah, I was a little confused when they would show up as like, transparent figures. I'm like, so are they dead? Are they really here? Is he just seeing those? And then I just started to gather, at least from my own perspective, I could be totally wrong, that he was just seeing like memories to try to like, because the town was like, or whoever was
Yeah.
showing him like the story, because like when I walked into that room, and because you had to like go get a whole key for that, the room I'm talking about, where like you saw like the ritual or whatever they
Yeah.
were doing, and I was kind of confused at first. I was like, so are they really here? But then I just thought it was like something that probably happened in the past, and he was just being
Right.
shown it for whatever reason to gain more information. I don't know, but
Maybe it was like Alessa, because again, she's not evil. Maybe it was her
oh,
trying
to
to
help him
to
understand.
lead
Yeah,
him to like save
that's true.
Cheryl and maybe save her, which didn't happen, but
That's
or it
interesting.
did in a sense. But what do you? We talked pretty much about it, but like, yeah, what are your thoughts on the whole Carrie and Margaret White like influence? Because I really love it. The more I think about it, I'm like, this is like so close to that, but it's in a really awesome way. Um,
No, I agree. I mean, it's unique enough where again it stands on its own. It's not like
yeah,
a copy exactly of Carrie, especially because in Carrie, like Margaret was extremely like horrified when she found out Carrie had these
right,
sort of powers or whatever. Whereas I feel like in Silent Hill, like Dahlia was trying to obviously use to her advantage her daughter's
right.
powers or whatever, and because she was cray cray and whatever. But it's like I like that too, because obviously if anybody watches this channel and has seen any of our other podcast videos, whatever, we obviously are huge, both of us, fans of Stephen King, like huge.
Funnily
If
enough, we have got a whole podcast on all the Carrie films, so maybe I'll link that.
Oh, we do. Oh, yeah. Oh my God, yeah, we watched that second one. I remember The Rage. Um, yeah. But even in general, like not even just Carrie. Obviously, you and I are just huge Stephen King fans.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody knows I talk about Pet Cemetery Polly as much as I talk about Billy Cohen. Oh my God, see, I even found a way to fit him into this one. But anyway, so I don't know. Being a huge Stephen King fan too, seeing any references of his work, especially one that I really love, like Carrie. I've always loved the movie, obviously the 1960s, 1976. It's 76, right? Is when the first one came out. Is it
Yeah,
that
I think
old?
so. Yeah.
Jeez, that movie came out forever ago. With Sissy Spacek, I've always loved that movie. And then I read the book actually semi recently, maybe like, I guess like maybe 6, 7 months ago. Maybe that's not too recent, but I did read it and it was really good. So seeing like that influence, especially again in a game, a PS1, I don't want to downplay the PS1. PlayStation 1 was a great console. It spawned so many classic games, but I think again for a PS1 game, PS1 era game, this game is so layered and deep, more so than I've ever seen from a game
Yeah, no, I
of
think
that time.
I know what you're what you mean. Like, I feel like Silent Hill was way ahead of its time in terms of
Yes,
like, I
definitely.
feel like it's only in the past maybe 10 years that games have really gotten really deep with their stories, where I feel like
No,
Silent
definitely.
Hill is now over 20 years old, and it has such a deep and complex story.
Yeah, no, that was definitely the phrase I was looking for. It was so ahead of its time, I felt like, because I mean, you play games obviously later on, like you said, and they can be deep and dark and layered. I mean, one example because I always praise this game too is like Eternal Darkness. It's deep in a different way. It's very like
Hmm.
I guess what's that guy? Like Lovecraftian type deep, but it's
Yeah,
still, it still has its own deep and also horror elements and sanity and different deep story elements, but that came out a couple years later. But I just think Silent Hill being a PS1 game, it blows my mind how ahead of its time it was story wise. And I think implementing the whole influence from Stephen King is not only awesome because it's Stephen fucking King and he's great and his stories are great, but it's just like having a story of an abusive mother, a religious
hmm,
fanatic abusive mother to an innocent. And it was sad because in that scene where Alessa's like begging and like the voice actor whoever voiced Alessa did so good, because I was like, oh my God, I feel so, like it made me feel like I was watching maybe Sissy, because when Sissy Spacek does that scream when Margaret's dragging her to the closet, I'm always like, oh my God, I feel so bad for this. This is terrible. What am
right.
I watching? Like, it's like, it
Hmm.
makes you feel so bad. And I feel like the game had that sort of same, it gave me that same feeling. So any game that can like affect you like that, especially
Right.
again, a PS1 era game, I'm not trying to keep downplaying other PS1 games, but I feel like for that time, it was
Hmm.
so ahead of its time. So
Yeah.
I loved the reference. I thought it was really well done. And again, not a super, I mean, I guess if you're a horror fan, it could be like, oh, that's kind of cool. It kind of reminds me of Carrie, but like, it's not to the point where it's like just a complete copy of the story of Carrie. It's definitely different
No.
enough. I like the reference.
Yeah, me too. And there was just one other thing on again, the voice performances again, maybe it's a little stilted and off or whatever, but I
Yeah.
also because she also voiced Cheryl. God, I wish I knew these voice actors' names better than you, but she, maybe I'll pull them up and shout them out before we move on to the movie. But there was another line she did when Harry, it was one point early on where he went to leave a room and then those blue telephones started ringing.
Oh yeah.
And he picked it up and it's like Cheryl, like, I always, her delivery in that always stuck out to me. It's always like, oh, that makes me feel so sad when she's like, Daddy, where are you?
Oh yeah, I remember that. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God. No, she's good. Whoever that is, again, and kid actors at that time, not always the best. So like she did really, and I think the only reason, like you said, it's stilted and off at some points is because it's of the era. And a lot of the time
Right.
Japanese companies weren't always the best at translating to English. And like from what I heard, how they recorded voices back then is you were just in a booth by yourself just saying the line, so there was no context. You couldn't hear the other person and feed off of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they do
Like,
a lot more today with the other, like, with mocap and all the
right.
people and everything. So I only fault it for its time, why some of the voice acting might be a little like at times, but it's
Right, but again,
definitely
like
not
I
to
said
the.
earlier, it definitely works in this game's
Yeah,
favor. It works with the atmosphere,
it's not like
which
you
I
can't
like.
take it serious like RE1, which again, RE1's great. We love it for the reason why, like the dialogue is part of its charm, but I think, and this game you can definitely take serious. It doesn't take you out of it, like, yeah, like you were saying.
So I think that's all with Dahlia and Alessa. I feel like
Yes.
there's only two more characters that we could talk about, and one of them I don't feel like there's much to talk about him, but he's very much involved with the other character story, and I know you said you
Hmm.
ended up really liking her for more than one reason.
Oh yeah,
I
I know.
guess
Yeah.
we're going to talk about Lisa Garland, who is
Yes.
the nurse that Harry. It's very weird, and again, back to the what's real and what's not, where multiple times in the game, Harry would be with Sybil and Dahlia or whatever, and then he'd pass out, and then
Hmm.
he'd wake up, and he's back in the hospital with Lisa, and then he'd pass
Yeah,
out
I
again, and then
liked
he's
that.
somewhere else. Um, and like Lisa's whole thing about, she kept saying, Harry was very protective over her, which was really nice. But she
Yeah, I
seemed
liked
like
that.
she was very apprehensive to like leave the hospital. Like she
Yeah.
said at one point, I feel like I have to stay here, which
Right.
we learn why later.
Right.
But and I know I told you, I always liked again, Silent Hill gets a lot of influence from a lot of different things, but I always liked that Lisa Garland has similarities with Judy Garland.
Yes, which
Not
I
only the
love.
last name, but also
Yeah,
the
the story.
tragicness of,
Yes.
and with Lisa, it was, Dr. Kaufman got her, because, and when we were playing this, there's the Kaufman subplot that people who play Silent Hill
Hmm.
know about, and I kept telling Brandi, oh, there's this one optional thing that we don't have to do that I want us to do, which we did, and I
Right.
kind of led her to that, which is with Kaufman and finding out about the drug that he's trafficking, and it has something to do with the cult. Maybe that's how the cult is getting their money because he's involved in that as well. But he
Yeah.
got Lisa hooked on that drug, which is called PTV, I think, in this game.
Yeah, he's creepy. He's like the fucking equivalent of like irons or some shit out of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
movie. And he got,
yeah.
yeah,
He got her hooked on it so she could keep like treating Alessa, and
right.
yeah. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Lisa? I know you liked her.
Yeah, I know. I don't. Again, I can't really put my finger on exactly why I liked her. It probably was like the tragedy of her story, although you don't initially know that at first. But I think it was like, first of all, again, I'm gonna sound so shallow, but I don't care. Like I thought she was really pretty too. I kept saying that to you,
Right.
and I do think when you have a characters. Okay, again, I'm probably gonna get some hate for that. I don't care if if anybody hears me say this. Some people might have a different opinion because I've heard people, kind of get on me before about this when I've talked about like Jill was so pretty when Julia was her face model, or Claire in Dark Side Chronicles had like the perfect face, whatever. And people are,
Right.
like have said, oh, you can't always just play as like they're unrealistically attractive characters, which I don't agree with that at all. I don't think they're unrealistic at all. But
Right.
and speaking of Lisa, like I'm sorry, but when you come across a character or even play as a character in a game that is just attractive, it just helps. I feel like for you to be more like, and it's gonna sound again shallow, drawn to them. And Lisa was, I don't know, especially for PS1 era, she was really like, I was like, oh my god, she's got a really pretty face model. Like she didn't look
Mm-hmm.
super generic like a lot of, I feel like characters at that time did in CG cutscenes. She had like this like prettiness and feminine feminine quality to her that I just really I was just drawn to. I'm drawn to like female characters that are very feminine like that. That's just my thing. I've always been like that. But then on the flip side of that, I love like Ellie from The Last of Us, who's like, you know, rough and she gets dirty and you know, and I like her too. So it's not, but like I don't know, I've been always been drawn like that. Maybe that's why I love Excella so much, that bitch. But she's also funny. But so I think like that helped with me initially, just being interested in her, seeing her in the CG cutscenes and being like, wow, she's really pretty. And like then she was acting really often, like, and that helped with the mystery of like, okay, why is she acting like that? And then the fact that you only ever really see her in like the rusty world, like when you would go into like the
Right.
rust or like the dark world, I was
The
like,
other world,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and she was like, and then I liked how Harry was starting to sort of like, I don't know if you would say like a fatherly instinct for her, but he was like starting to be like, okay, you know, I want to like wanting to help her. And then it's like weird because you kind of feel as the player like you want to help her too for whatever reason. I don't know if it was
Hmm.
again her face, the way her face looked, her voice actor, there was something
Right.
about her character that intrigued me and made me want to like help her and find out more about her. Probably also the writing and the mystery quality of it all. I just
Hmm.
think she was a really well done character. Looks, voice, story, everything like kind of draws you to her, at least for me. This is again my whole own opinion.
Right.
And then when you started telling me like, oh, you know, oh yeah, remember when as soon as they said her last name too, I made a reference to Judy Garland. I was like, oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
you know, like Judy Garland. And again, you never said too much and never, but you were just like, well, you know, that might be a thing. And I was like, wait, what? And then I noticed she was wearing, again, I don't know if this was intentional, maybe because of the Judy Garland reference, but she was wearing like red shoes the whole time, which again, Judy Garland's most famous role is
Right.
the Wizard of Oz with the ruby slippers. So I liked that whole thing.
Hmm.
I always thought, a little side note, but it has to do with the, you know, the story. But like I always thought Judy Garland's story was so fucked up and tragic. I've watched so many documentaries and different things on her life, and it's just like it's almost to the point where it just like infuriates me. I can't sometimes I can't stomach to think of like what she went through in Hollywood.
Didn't
It's
you say,
really
because
fucked
I
up.
don't know a lot about her story, but besides like the drugs, which was the
Right,
connection to Lisa, but did you
right.
say something about like, was she used by people?
Yes, and it's interesting that
Because,
Kaufman forced
yeah, I was
Lisa
just
to
gonna
do
say
drugs
that,
because no,
because he's
because
using her to,
yeah, because Judy
but,
Garland did not willingly become like like you know,
right.
no offense, I love my girl Marilyn Monroe. She's actually hanging on my wall. I'm looking at her face right now. I love her, but she, I think, you know, while had a tragic, you know, life in Hollywood, she chose drugs willingly. Judy Garland
Hmm.
was 16 when she made Wizard of Oz, and she was forced on drugs by the executives at MGM. Because people back then in Hollywood were really fucked up. They would call her fat. They said that she was too fat to play Dorothy, so she had to be on drugs to it's actually it really actually really upsets me. I hate even talking about it, but I mean it's the
Yeah.
reality of what she faced. So she was forced on drugs by the executives, and the rest of her life from 16 and onward after the like, and you think of Wizard of Oz and it's this beautiful, you know, childlike movie with like this charm and magical, but then you think of what she went through behind the scenes. She was also starved. She wasn't allowed to eat. She was given a diet of like I think like black coffee it said, and like an orange a day is what she was allowed to have, and then they would just give her
Hmm.
cigarettes because cigarettes apparently help you stay skinny, or they thought so back then. So
Right.
she was forced on amphetamines, which ended up being the drug that I think ultimately took her life. But I mean, it's a shame because that's how she was treated. That's why I think the connection. Once you said Kaufman, and that because when she went after him at the end, Lisa, and you were like, oh well, he was the one that was responsible. I'm like, well, there that makes
Yep.
total sense to the Judy Garland reference then, because that's exactly what happened to her, which is fucked
Well, I'm
up.
glad you know more about like that story as well, because again, my only really connection as far as Lisa was and Judy Garland, like I said, was the drugs. But knowing that there's more parallels like that, like that Kaufman also used her for his own benefit or whatever, is really
Yeah, and it's
fucked
so,
up. And
and
then
I like that she got revenge. It's almost like Judy Garland
yeah,
got her
she,
revenge, even if it's in a video
yeah,
game
no,
years later.
yeah, you're talking about at the end when Kaufman's trying to escape and Lisa comes out of the ground and drags him back in and doesn't let him escape, like with Harry
Yeah.
and Sybil, so he'll be trapped there as well. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
she may
no.
honestly be my favorite character in the whole game. I know that might be. I liked Sybil a
Oh,
lot too, but I really
yeah.
liked Lisa because of the tragedy. And again, the mystery. Again, the entire time when you keep running into her, you don't really know what's going on. And like when she cries, like, again, her voice actor. I remember when she broke down crying at one point. I think I even said to
Hmm.
you like, wow, her voice actor did a really good job because it was very convincing. So again, I don't know what it is. I don't really know what makes up a character. Like for me, I think I can like any character as long as their story's good. But I also think voice and even the way that they look to a certain degree has a lot to do for me. Again, I know that might sound shallow, but I think for me, like
Right.
I liked everything about Lisa from the get-go, and then her story, I was like, oh my god, and I'm glad
Hmm.
she got her revenge. I really liked
Right.
her.
Right. And just one last thing on her, and the whole Judy Garland thing. I don't know if that's specifically why in the game she died, but I feel like that's what I have surmised is that Lisa also, that's what, because she says at one point when she finds out why she can't leave the hospital, because she says she's the same as them, and she means
Oh yeah.
the nurses that are attacking Harry, those monsters, but she
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
realize that she's dead like them. But I feel like from what I've gathered that she also died because of that drug.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Yeah, but then she started like, which I guess could have just been for like a spooky moment, or like because she is dead. Like she started like gushing blood at one point, and I was just like, oh my god, what is happening? And that was when
Right.
I was still kind of
Well,
confused. So I don't.
maybe that was again when she finally realized what she was, that she was the same as
Right.
those monsters, but she didn't, and then it just kind of like then she, I guess, fell apart for lack of a better term.
Right.
Um,
I'm
I
glad you didn't
guess
have to fight her, because I thought that they would, because
yeah,
Resident Evil does that a lot. If a character obviously
and
mutates or becomes something else, you usually have to fight them. But I'm glad we didn't have to fight her, because I liked her
there's
so
so
much.
much more I want to say on Lisa, and I think I like that you like her to the extent that you do,
Hmm.
because, again, I don't want to say anything for the future, but I will say that in some way you haven't seen the last of Lisa in the series.
Oh, that's awesome. Obviously, I don't want to know when, but that's awesome
Right.
because I really do like her.
This last thing I think I told you before. In my high school, I had this really awesome art teacher who, would let me make whatever I want, even if it was like violent or whatever, because
Oh,
she's like,
that's
it's
cool.
art,
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want. I feel like there could be some teachers that would be like, no, that's inappropriate for school. But she was
Right.
awesome, and she was like one of my favorite teachers, and let me do it. But so I told you I made, and I might even like send you a picture at some point. Because I think I still have it. I made the Flauros, that triangle thing that
Oh
Dahlia gives
yeah.
to that you use at the end that she gives to Harry. I made that out of like clay, and then it's like a solid thing now.
Oh,
But
that's cool.
on Lisa, I attempted to do this in high school, but it became too complicated. I tend to do that a lot. I even today with like even music videos or whatever. I have like, oh, this is a great idea, and then I'm just like, oh, but this is too complicated, and I can't figure out how to do it. But in high
Right.
school, the whole Lisa scene with the blood pouring down her face,
Yeah.
which is like one of the most iconic moments in the series, and very iconic to the survival horror genre. I don't know if you knew that,
No,
but
but I can see why though. It's very
that whole
compelling and
scene,
interesting.
I in high school I tried to do it, but again it was too complicated. But I tried to like recreate that scene in like a similar fashion, kind of like a flip book in a sense.
Oh, that's cool.
But I never was able to figure it out. But yeah, on that scene, I remember I tried to do that in high school because I was a silent little nerd back then.
No, that's
Back then when I
awesome.
was trying to get you to play the games and you were like,
Oh my
well, I
god.
like Resident Evil or whatever you.
Oh yeah, should we even like go into my closed-mindedness? I mean, that would just be like a quick thing, but it is funny that like, I mean, we probably should have said this in the beginning, but like, well, you kind of did say it. Like, I've never played any of the Silent Hill games, even though I grew up with Resident Evil. Everybody knows I love Resident Evil.
Right.
I mean, I grew up from the age of like 4 with Resident Evil, and but my for whatever reason, my dad never got into Silent Hill or played them at least in front of me, so I didn't grow up with them. So while Resident Evil is like a huge influence in my life, especially started in many ways my love of horror and everything. I never had played the other side of it, which was Silent Hill, because again, I feel like at one point they were like the two top tier front runners of survival horror was Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and it's a shame what happened to Silent Hill. I still definitely want to talk about that, but it is funny that I've never played them. And then when I met you, although fast forward after I was a child and went through my phase with Resident Evil and loved it, and then I started watching Resident Evil videos on YouTube and stuff, and you and I met and making my own videos. You were like, you would message me and you were just like, well, have you ever played the Silent Hill games? They're similar to Resident Evil, they're survival horror, I think you would like them, blah blah blah. And I would just be like such an asshole, and I'm gonna admit it. um I I'm a very strongly opinionated person anyway. Shocker, right? I have a lot of my own, strong opinions on certain things when it comes to anything I love, like Resident Evil. It could be fucking Pet Cemetery. It could be like anything that I really like love and hold in high
Mm-hmm.
regard. I'm gonna be opinionated on. I mean, I'm the same way with like, my politics, although I don't like force them on anybody or anything, but just in my own, like, I just have, I'm just like that. So, but that I am a lot better now than I used to be. Like, I am a lot more, I would like to think open-minded. I mean, I'm 25 years old now. I'm going to be 26 soon now. But, and I feel like I've come a long way. But when I was 16, when you and I first met, which is so crazy that I met you when I was that young. I mean, I was in high school. I was a lot more like, and I think maybe everybody at that age is, because you think you know everything and everything. I was a lot more stubborn and stuck in my ways, and just I was like basically like a fucking old person. I was just stuck in my ways and nobody could tell me anything. And I remember you bringing up Silent Hill, and I was just like, no, I don't want to play that. I was like, I feel like that's just a copy of, and I for some reason at that time I felt like I just had to be loyal to. It was almost like Resident Evil was my boyfriend, and if I played Silent Hill,
You
I would
didn't
be
want to
cheating
cheat
on him.
on him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, and I don't know why, and I also was just like, I don't think I would like him. Like, I don't know, I was such like, I don't know why I was like that. Again, I cringe at how, but like that's why I wish we still had some of our old messages, but I fucking YouTube got rid of their messaging altogether, so you can't even go back and look for old messages. But it'd be funny because I think I remember saying that to you, and you were just like, well, they're really good games and they're different, and like you were just trying to explain it, and I was just like, I mean, I would like to think I wasn't like rude to you, and I've always had like
No.
a cordial friendship, but I think in my head I was just like, I'm not playing this game. And it's like, and it sucks I was
But
like that
you've
because
come a
they
long
probably
way.
would have
You
been, no, that's true, but they probably would have been so much easier to obtain back then, so I wish I would have just been like, all right, I'll buy them, but maybe I won't play them. But I really wish I was
right.
able to have had them. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's my long story short of me being an asshole back in the day. But I am glad that, and I bought Silent Hill, the one we just played through. I bought it on PS1 Classics, like you said, through the PS3, and I bought it like almost a year ago, probably maybe like a little bit less. And
Mm,
you and I still haven't went through it yet because, of course, we got distracted by other things. And I was like, I'll eventually play it.
right.
One of my biggest, like, I guess, why I was so apprehensive at first to play it was because I seriously thought, and if you want to kind of go into the difficulty of the game, or like what I thought of the game's like
Mm.
difficulty, I was so scared to play this at first because I thought it was gonna be like a Revelations 2.
Yeah, I know
Um,
that's how you were a little apprehensive to play it, but I'm glad it wasn't challenging. It
yeah.
was the we got to talk about the one thing that was incredible, really like getting us really both of us really frustrated, and it was the first boss. But
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
but no, I'm glad it wasn't really that much of a struggle either. I think I've mentioned this to you before. I honestly couldn't remember if this game was like this, but for the most part, especially Silent Hill 2, but for the most part, like the combat and the action is not really these games' focus.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to run away from enemies most of the time,
Yeah,
and the
versus
map is
Resident Evil where
incredibly
you just
helpful.
get grabbed. No, the map is very like I thought my main worries were I was gonna die a bunch because I just thought the combat was gonna be hard. I also thought, and old survival horror games, the whole thing is like you're trying to survive the horror, so they give you less ammo, which makes sense. Like I've always loved that about Resident Evil, how you're limited and you have to really think about who's worth killing, who's not. So I thought Silent Hill was going to work on that, and they did sort of, but I feel like I got way more ammo in Silent Hill 1 versus
Hmm.
Resident Evil 1. Like I kept comparing RE1 to Silent Hill 1 because obviously they're the first, the starters of their series, of their respective series. And I think RE1, and it's funny, I would like to consider myself a decent Resident Evil player, although Revelations 2, fuck that game. I hope to become better at that one. But I would like to think at this point, especially with the classics, I'm comfortable with them and the way that they play, that I can get through them relatively easily. However, RE1, whether it's director's cut or the original RE1, I always just have like an issue with. I just think it's really hard. You get like nothing in that game in the very beginning. Once you go through it and you start obtaining more like guns and stuff, it gets a little easier. But I think like the first like hour of that game is like a struggle to get to each room and try to find a save room, and it's very, very hard. So I
Hmm.
thought Silent Hill was gonna play like that because I'm like, oh fuck. I mean, as good as I am at Resident Evil, I'm not. I still fuck up at director's cut all the time. So is Silent Hill gonna be that way? And I don't think it was that way at all. I think Silent Hill 1 was
Hmm.
so much easier. It gave you much more ammo, and because you were running around like a city a lot of the time in open spaces, it was easier to run away from enemy. Like in Resident Evil, you're very like, you know, confined like to little hallways and stuff, and trying to run around zombies is not doable a lot of the time because they just kind of grab you and stun lock you and stuff. Whereas in Silent Hill, even though the feeling of isolation is still there in Silent Hill because of the fog and everything, and I really, really do want to talk about the atmosphere,
Hmm.
because it was so good in this game. But gameplay wise and difficulty wise, I was really surprised and happy that it was kind of like, I wouldn't say a breeze because I don't want to say it was just, I had never played it before, so I didn't know a lot of the time where I was going, but the map was super helpful. The amount of ammo that you get, I feel like was fair. The amount of health you get was fair. And I don't want to say it was a breeze where there was no challenge at all, because I liked how there was a challenge, but it wasn't to the point where I was throwing my controller down and wanting to rage quit every 2 seconds. Because if it was like that, I don't know if I would have gotten through it that easily. But it was fun. That's what made it fun, is that it wasn't overly challenging, but it also wasn't like baby, RE3 on easy mode type shit. Anybody that's
Yeah.
ever played RE3 on easy mode knows what I mean. But I mean, I liked it, and I really liked the gameplay. I had to get used to it because I was used to tank controls and fixed camera angles, and this gameplay is obviously a little bit different than that. But once I got used to it and the buttons of like what was the map, what was the inventory, I enjoyed the game like a lot from a gameplay standpoint.
And I'm really glad for that because again, that one boss that I want to talk about quickly, and I don't know why. It never sort of
It is
occurred
funny,
to
though.
us, or me even, because I played this game before and I've beaten it before. But I remember, a year or two ago, I played this game, was having so much fun. Wasn't really much of a challenge, and then I
Yeah,
made it to the first boss, which is like maybe an hour or more in,
right.
and I had to give up when I played it. Then I had to get because I just was eating all my ammo, getting so mad.
Yeah.
I don't, and it's oh God, I should look up his name, but I don't remember its name. Um,
Yeah, what does he even look
but
like though? He's got like his
oh,
mouth
it's a
opens.
split head. It's a split
Split.
head boss. He kind of split,
Okay.
yeah. So I had to give up when I played it myself, and then I was nervous the whole time. I didn't say this to you, but I was nervous up until that point. I was like, man, I really hope we can get past that because I'm having so much fun playing with you for the first time.
Right.
And we just kept shooting it and shooting it and shooting it, and nothing was happening.
Yeah, and like I
And
ran out of
then
ammo at one point. I was like,
because
what
it
the
has an instant kill as well.
Yes.
And then I think at one point I was just so frenzied and frustrated. I was like, well, what do we have to do? Shoot it in the mouth? And then you were like, oh, maybe that
Let's
makes
try
sense.
that.
And then you shoot it once, and then it's just so
Oh my
I built
god.
that boss up to be more than it actually was. But
Oh, that's so funny. No, I kind of compared it to like the alligator fight in RE2, which is one of the easiest boss fights in Resident Evil history, if you know what to do. But funnily enough, real quick, my sister just went through RE2, the original, for the first time, which is insane. She grew up with the games like me too. She's late to the party, but she just went through RE2 and she was like talking to me and she goes, "Oh yeah, the alligator fight, and I pumped a bunch of rounds into him. I guess she was playing as Claire, and she was like, and then he died
mhm.
eventually." And I was like, what girl? Like what? Again, anybody that's played RE2 and has beaten the fucking alligator knows how to beat that boss. You just get him to put the bomb in his mouth or whatever, that explosive, and you just shoot him and he's dead. But it's like, I guess if you don't know that, so similarly to this first boss in Silent Hill, if you don't know that or you forget, in Dylan's case, because obviously you've beaten it before, you probably knew that but just forgot. It's like
Mhm.
so funny that it was so easy. Like it was such an easy solution, but like if you don't like know that going into it, you're just gonna wait. Because I wasted, like, I remember we went through all our shotgun and then I had to switch to the handgun, and I like
Yep.
it was I don't even know if you can possibly beat him any other way. You probably have to shoot him in his mouth, because
I
I
don't
think I was
know.
just gonna waste all my ammo.
I feel
But
like again, maybe I knew that and I had forgotten it because before the last time I played this, before I played with you, before then I don't know when the last time I played this. Maybe I forgot, but
right.
yeah, I think the only thing left I wanted to talk about the game, and then we can give final thoughts on the game. The creatures, very briefly,
Oh
because I
yeah.
told you that in Silent Hill the creatures, they all symbolize something.
Right.
Usually to do with the player character, but in this it's a symbol. It has to do with Alessa.
Right.
Um, and I think it would be kind of fun as we like eventually make, or eventually if we're able to play through the other games, to kind of like, even I can explain to you like what they mean, and you'll understand, get it on a deeper level or whatever.
Right.
And then we can also talk about like the fucking what creatures bug the shit out of us. So yeah, we already talked
Oh yeah.
about the gray children, which are the first one, and they were a pain in the ass, but they obviously symbolize, which I told you already,
They're a pain
the
in the ass, but they're also very creepy too. I like their design and the noises that they make,
yeah,
and they just kind of like they just like shuffle up to you, and they're all short and creepy, so they're
yeah,
creepy.
yeah. And I told you already that they symbolize the children that bullied Alessa in the school.
I know, it's fucked
And
up.
and then remember that like squeaky little black ghost looking little kid?
Yes. Yeah. It was
I
like,
told you
yeah.
that's supposed to symbolize Alessa and how the kids made her feel.
Oh wow.
And apparently I've seen, and how it'll like, apparently I've seen before that, I don't know if it happened to us too much, but like it's kind of like sad and cute, but like that little harmless little fucking black ghost supposed to symbolize Alessa. Like sometimes it will just straight up follow Harry around,
Oh wow. Yeah, it only
like as
happened
if
to me a few
Harry,
times, but
like
aw.
it thinks looking to Harry for help or whatever.
So is that then, like, when you run into that, is it different every playthrough? Like you can run into it in certain rooms, or is it like a stage, like it's supposed to happen in certain area type thing? Because
I
I only
think
saw it a few times, I remember.
yeah, I think it pops up just a handful of times, and I think it pops up where like usually the same places. Very quickly, I wanted to go through the creatures and then kind of explain to you like what they meant.
Right.
So remember the flying pterodactyl things?
Oh yeah.
that were really annoying and hard to get away from. They'd
Yeah,
kick you and
they kick you in the head. Yeah.
well, they're called air screamers. I made a couple notes and I pulled up the wiki, but they apparently are a manifestation of an illustration in one of Alessa's favorite books, The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So that's
What?
why
That's cool.
that was one of her favorite books, and that's kind of where they sprung from.
So literally everything in it has a meaning. That's cool. Because I
Hmm.
knew the nurses and the dark children or gray children, whatever they are. I know that they did, but I didn't know the stuff in the actual town when you're running around had any
Yeah,
significant meaning. That's cool.
no, they all do, and I tried to pull up all the ones. There's only a couple, but
Right.
then you remember there was the other versions that kind of looked like the Gray Children, but they were like brown,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
they were
yeah.
in the sewers.
Yes.
It says that the mumblers take on a dark image of the small menacing animals and demons from fairy tales that Alessa used to frequently read as a child. So they're like
Well,
from
that's
fairy
creepy.
tales and stuff.
That's cool though. It's cool that everything has a reason for existing.
And then those ones in the sewers, they're kind of like green. Then they kind of
Oh,
like
like the
swung
kind
people
that
from
we
this. Yeah.
yeah, we compared them to chimeras, yeah.
They are called hanged scratchers, and
Ooh.
they're a composite of many insect specimens due to Alessa's fear of insects. And then it says the fact that they
Oh.
appear and move very reptilian in nature could be akin to a dragon, alluding to Alessa's love for fairy tales.
Oh wow, so they're like a mesh of two things. Wow, see, Alessa, I feel you, girl. She's scared of insects. I can see it. They did
Oh,
look a
you're
little
Silent
insecty.
Hill. I can only imagine your Silent Hill, the creatures that you would see.
Oh man. No, I don't want to. I'd see a bunch of Zeldas everywhere if it's gonna prey on my fears.
I know.
What about those annoying ass, like we kept calling them like monkey things, but the ones that
Oh
were
yeah, yeah,
fast?
those. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are called rompers, and they are
Ooh.
supposed to symbolize Alessa how she felt like adults were overbearing and like controlling to her. So that's
Oh,
why they
that's
would like
interesting.
pin you to the floor and you know.
So it's not always, it wasn't always like a physical, like obviously like the gray children are physical representations of physical like people trying like the
Yeah,
bullies.
the
But like
bullies,
it's interesting that those again I don't what were they called? Rompers?
the
It's
rompers.
interesting that they're like a representation of something like not like intangible, but like
Yeah,
because
like
that's interesting. It's like just like the overbearing feeling she felt around adults. That's
around
very
adults.
interesting.
Yeah,
That's very deep.
yeah. And then I think the only last one was the final boss, whose name that we fought because we got the good ending was called Incubus, and
Mm.
he was basically just a manifestation of one of the deities that the cult worshipped.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
So he was more
So,
just
well, I guess you don't want to tell me. I was gonna ask about other bosses. I mean, I want to play through the game again. Like, I had so much fun with it that I would willingly, definitely go through a new game plus. So I want to get like different endings and see certain things. That's very interesting. I didn't know again that I know the nurses and the gray children. That was it. And then I was like, well, maybe the other
yeah,
ones are just there for filler because they needed more enemies. But it's very cool that
yeah,
everything does have a a
hmm and
significant.
that definitely carries over with all the games. So it'll
I
be
know that's
very
awesome.
interesting to get into all that stuff when we
See, that's where
get
the
to those as
uniqueness
well.
versus Resident Evil, and again, they're different, so I don't like to keep
Yeah,
comparing them. Silent Hill is definitely more of a psychological, in-depth horror game, whereas Resident Evil is
hmm
obviously apocalyptic zombies and
right.
bioterrorism and science and all that stuff. So they're very different. It's interesting to see the two different types of horror that just made survival horror. Like after playing Silent Hill, I was like, man, I it's interesting because it's so different than Resident Evil and it gives you a different perspective of a completely different type of horror. So again,
Hmm
again, speaking on RE7, horror, there are different types of horror within horror. Like there's not just horror. There's so many different subgenres in the genre of
Right.
horror. I'm just gonna say that and leave it at that because I don't want to start a rant about Seven in a Silent Hill podcast. But and that's proof right there. Silent Hill has a completely different brand of horror than Resident Evil.
Right.
And
It's its
playing the
own
two
identity.
and I
It just
love
kind of,
that. Again,
you know,
I would have hated if it was exactly like Resident Evil because again, I would have felt as a Resident Evil fan, I would have felt like maybe offended by that or just like, oh wow, this is just trying to be Resident Evil, and I'm so glad it was not. It was definitely its
yeah.
own thing. Oh, and I
Well,
want to just
I
say, because I don't want people to think we were playing on easy baby mode because I kept saying
no.
the game was easy. We did play on normal, and I'm glad that we did. Because remember, I was debating when we first started, like, you were like,
Right.
Brandi,
Yeah.
I'll play easy too if you want to. Like, it's up to you. And you left it up to me. And I was like,
I'm
you know
glad we
what? Let's
didn't. Yeah.
try normal. Because it was it was very fair, I will say that, the game. Again, challenging enough
Yeah.
where I was challenged, and I did die a couple times. I was proud of myself though. I didn't die at all until that boss, and then a couple
Hmm.
times after. Oh, Sybil's ass killed me a bunch. I don't know if you want to talk
Oh
briefly about that,
yeah.
but that part was really hard where she's like infected and you have to go up to her with a, thank God you told me about that bottle thing, because if I
I
had to try to
know.
fight her,
There are a
she
couple
was
things in
hard.
this game that are very
Very
not
vague.
explained.
Yeah.
So yeah, you find the red liquid in the hospital, and you can use it later on Sybil to save her, like to purge the parasite from her body.
I mean,
But
she does
didn't
a
you?
shit ton of damage, which makes like she shoots you once and you're like blinking red and you better heal, or if she shoots you again, you die. And I kept dying. I died at least 2 times or 3 times
Yeah.
on her. While it was easy to get through and fun to play, it wasn't hard again in the point in the way where I wasn't having fun. I was having fun, but it also was
Yeah.
challenging where there were certain things that I faced and I was like, oh my God, like with Sybil, and then them. I guess they're called rompers now. I was gonna call them those monkey things because we kept saying that.
Yeah,
They
I
were
told you a
annoying.
couple of times when we were outside, I was like, you just have to keep running because those things
Yeah.
are on your ass.
Well, it's funny because you saw them before I did. You went like, I heard you react and go, oh, and I was just like, what was it? One of the pterodactyl things? And you were like, no, and I was like, well, what was it? And we were running through Silent Hill, so at that point, and I was like, was it a dog? And you were like, no, and you were like, just keep running. And I was like, oh, I didn't see anything. And you were like, okay, well, just if you see him, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my screen. He didn't run after me. I just saw one walk like slow, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And you were just like, "Just keep running."
I know.
I think all the creatures are so creepily well designed too. I just wanted to say that too. Like,
Yeah.
we're talking about several different things right now, and oh my God, we have to talk. I mean, this will go along with the movie as well, but again, we talked a little bit about the atmosphere, but we have to talk about the music for a second because holy shit, it's so good. I feel
It's
like
incredible. Silent Hill has.
Resident Evil always has had amazing music, so I was like, and I always knew Silent Hill did too because funnily enough, never played the games, but it was definitely aware of certain tracks,
I
and I was
know.
really excited.
I said that to you at one point that it must mean something. That this music is that big or iconic in the survival horror or just the video game world that you had never played them yet. You knew certain tracks, and you were even when we were watching the movie, and I told you that that's composed of music from the whole series or the first 4 games.
Yeah,
You were like excited when you heard certain tracks in the movie.
because they're like so haunting, and I do feel like iconic at this point because I've watched a lot of horror related things on YouTube and stuff, and a lot of people use the Silent Hill tracks and stuff when they're like, if they're describing something just scary. I watch like, or even like creepy pastas, for example, which, I'm sure you know what they are, and I'm sure
Yeah.
anybody listening will know what they are. A lot of the ones that I've listened to, because I'll listen to them like, sometimes before I fall asleep or whatever. It's been a while, but like I do know that they've used Silent Hill music. Some of them have even used Resident Evil music, which is awesome. I don't want to compare the two like music wise because I think they're both so good and they both have such haunting beautiful tracks, but it is
Hmm.
funny that I've never played Silent Hill yet. I was aware specifically of one in this game in Silent Hill 1. I think it's
Yep.
called Fear of the Dark is the track, and
Hmm.
I like fell in love with that when I heard. I thought it was super haunting. It just I don't even know how to describe it. It actually gave me like a goosebump type feeling whenever I would listen to it. And I again never ever played Silent Hill, but I was always so affected by that track. And it even was one of my intros a long time ago when I used to make music videos that are still up on my channel to this day. It was a very old intro that I made that
Right.
used that track. So like when that came on, I was especially excited. But even like the ones I wasn't aware of, like throughout the game, the more you go through, there's just like this like edgy like not edgy, that's not the wrong word, but there's like this creepy like edge to every song when you're in a
Hmm.
cutscene and it's just behind you and Harry's talking. You just feel like, ooh, this is like you feel
Well,
dread and then you feel like eerie. It's so good. Who's the
well, I think
composer? You have to shout him out. He's good.
Akira Yamaoka composed every
Yes.
game except for Downpour in the series.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I feel like I said this to you at one point. Like he, as much as the people who the the group that developed the first 4 games are called Team Silent. As much as they're part of the identity, Akira Yamaoka I think is like as important to the Silent Hill's identity as Shinji Mikami is to Resident Evil.
Yes, that's a very good because he was consistent and he stuck with it for so long and he's really really good. I mean,
And then
even
I
the
think the
music.
tracks they didn't get better per se, but they're even maybe when they started to get the female vocals in there, I really loved.
Oh
There was
yeah,
Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who I always joke and say, "Oh, that's so funny that she's Alex Wesker."
that is very funny. So see, there's always parallels between the two series, which is funny.
Mhm.
No, I like those tracks too. Like I even made a Resident Evil video, funnily enough, years ago with one of those songs.
I'm glad you mentioned music because I don't know why I didn't put that in my notes. I was just quickly doing notes before we started, but I'm glad.
Well,
Yeah, that's
music
definitely
is a
something we got
very
to talk
big
about.
thing. Yeah, for me in horror, Resident Evil, wow.
And you can't talk about.
Music is very key, I think, in creating a atmosphere. And if you have good music, that's why again, going back to Resident Evil, I hate playing the DualShock version of Director's Cut where they just butchered all of the music. I mean, there might be one or two decent tracks, but everything just sounds experimental and terrible. Because I feel like if you have a horror game or a horror movie, setting the tone is very important with A, the atmosphere has to be there, but B, what helps the atmosphere is when you have very good haunting music. And Resident Evil has always been like top dog with their music, at least the older games. And I didn't think like Silent Hill, well, not that I didn't think Silent Hill would be good, but I'm just like, how are they gonna rival Resident Evil with that? And oh my God, they're just as good. Like Silent
Mhm.
Hill's music is just as good to me as Resident Evil music. And it's funny, I've only played
Yeah.
one game where I've played all the Resident Evil games, but I feel like it's that good where I can say that. Again, music is just so important to me and stuff, so I had to just rant on about it for a second. I just think it's
Yeah.
so good, and I definitely wanted to say that.
I guess final thoughts. I'm very glad that you enjoyed the game as much as you did, and that you're excited to continue the
Yes.
series whenever and however that might actually happen at some point.
I know, it's a shame.
Because the state of Konami and the fact that they allowed those early games to just fade into obscurity, and they're expensive now, and they're not on newer consoles, except for the HD collection, which is trash. So we will continue soon. I hope.
Yes.
And then, when we do, I'll say when. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say if. When we do Silent Hill 2, I'd love to do a podcast on that as well.
I know. I really wish they were. I just wish they were on PS4 for PS2 classics. I know, I know
If
we
they
want to talk about
were,
the movie, so I won't rant on that much about this, but it's just funny that you can play any Resident Evil game on PS4 and PS3, but you can't get Silent Hill.
I know.
It baffles me because Silent Hill 2 is so popular. It's like the most popular in the series. Why would Konami let one of their most popular games just fall into obscurity?
And I've told you before, but it's worth saying on the podcast, the fact that we have an answer to that, because they make more money with their pachinko machines in
That's
Japan
crazy. That's
than
so
they do with
crazy.
video games. So it's probably less effort, more money, and they're just like, okay, we'll
Well,
let these things die.
why don't they continue to make their stupid pachinko machines, but also they'd have more money in their pocket if they just put Silent Hill 2 and 3 on PS2 classics. And 4, why not do at least the first 4 I want to play the first 4 games so bad.
I know, I was gonna say, if they were on that, I'd be like, Brandi, you want to start Silent Hill 2 tomorrow morning? And I'd be like, it's so sad that we can't do that.
I know, it's a shame. I mean,
Yeah.
even Code Veronica, I kept saying this to you, but it's so funny to me that Code Veronica has been so relevant in the Resident Evil world for so many years. Like, it started off on the fucking Dreamcast, a console that's company went completely under, Sega. Sorry, Sega, but it's true. And yet that game, I mean, I know that, Code Veronica X came out later on like the PS2, GameCube, and all that stuff or whatever, but the point is that game is still playable and easily accessible. Like, we have it on our PS4 for PS2 classics and on our PS3 for the HD re-release. So it's like, if a game like Konami really has no excuse at this point, and I
No.
feel very strongly about this, even though I didn't grow up with the Silent Hill games, but the fact that I've had so much fun with the first one and I would love to explore the rest of them, it makes me just as mad as probably an average Silent Hill fan that's like, come on, Konami. Like, I feel like they definitely need to pull their heads out of their asses and just release their games on the newer consoles so everybody can experience them. And maybe this whole Dead by Daylight thing or whatever the hell it's called, I think you and I were saying maybe this will be a good thing and maybe they'll realize.
It'll help, but
I hope, but I don't know.
my personal opinion, I think that is crumbs. They're offering us crumbs.
Yes. I know, that's
But
a
maybe
shame.
those crumbs will lead to something bigger. I don't know.
To a whole cake.
Very last thought on Konami. I saw somebody tweet this a little while ago, and it's just a perfectly way to describe their situation. They basically said, and maybe it was as a result of the DLC from Dead by Daylight that they said this. Somebody said, how could Konami let an IP this strong just die?
Right? No.
How could they
true.
do that?
That's at least we keep saying this, but to Capcom's credit, as much as we don't like to give those
We'll
shitheads
never
credit
have
either.
to. We'll never
Yeah,
have to like scrounge and spend hundreds of dollars to get
for
our
our
games that
games.
we grew up with.
Exactly. I mean, for a
So
while there, before they came out on PS2 classics and PS1 classics, I think, trying to get like a GameCube version of Code Veronica was pretty expensive at one point. Thank God I own that. I own all of the games on GameCube as well as the original PS1 ones. When it comes to Resident Evil, I'm pretty good, but like even if I didn't own them all, like they're so easy to get digitally, and I don't understand why Konami, at least if nothing else for their loyal fans of Silent Hill, just bring back we're not asking for new Silent Hill games, although I'm sure at like hardcore Silent Hill fans
I'd love
probably
that
want that as
too.
well, but
I would
just
just love
give
for the
us the old
classics to
ones.
not.
Yeah,
I know.
not the HD collection, which apparently is garbage.
It would have been
Just
It would have been wonderful if that was good.
I know, because then I
But
could just easily get that because I have a PS3. But it's so funny how how we were able to appreciate Capcom at least maybe an inch more than we were before because of this whole Konami shit. At least Capcom's always respected their old games enough to allow them to be accessible to even on the PS4. So
yeah,
that's good.
but I did want to again because I mentioned it earlier and I didn't have their names, just like Resident Evil. I like doing it because I feel like a lot of other people don't when they talk about video games to like
Hmm.
shout out the voice actors in this game.
Oh yeah, did you look it up?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
Michael G. I think.
Is that Harry?
Yeah, he voiced Harry Mason. IMDb says Michael Gwynn or something, but Michael G. Susan Papa voiced Sybil.
Yeah.
Thessaly Lerner voiced Lisa.
My girl.
Jerry and Monroe voiced Dr. Kaufman.
Ooh,
Sandra.
no, he's good. He's just the character I'm booing, not the voice actor.
I know. Sandra Wayne voiced Alessa / Cheryl.
Oh, she was good too. Again, was she like? Do you know if she was like a little girl when she voiced them,
I want to say
or does it not?
probably.
Okay, that's cool.
And then Liz Mamorsky voiced Dahlia Gillespie.
Oh, she was great too. That's awesome. I'm glad
Yeah.
you did look them up because I feel like again, you and I are very,
We
we feel
appreciate our voice
strongly about that.
actors,
Performance matters,
especially,
like we always say.
and especially in video games, they're just by the companies and by some gamers, they're just not valued. So,
Especially not in the way like we always say actors in like a TV show or series or movie would be. It's sad that they're not people don't hold them in the same regard, and it's like why, characters in video games are just as important. Some people might just play video games for the gameplay and that's fine, but like for me, I always want my characters and story I want that to be a part of it. And Silent Hill had all of that, so
yeah,
that's good.
yeah. So, yes, I'm so glad that you ended up liking the game. Hopefully soon we can continue, and if we can, I'm sure we'll be doing a podcast on Silent Hill 2. So stay tuned for that.
Should I rate it? Should I like give it like a something out of
Yeah,
something?
sure. You
Should I
want
do
to.
like out of 10 or out of 5 or does it not matter?
You do whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll do it like this because like at the end of the game, at least for me, when I got my results screen, there was like stars at the bottom of the screen,
Yeah.
and it looked like there was 10, and I got 4 out of 10, which I guess is a bad rating or whatever, but I don't know. But I'm gonna give it. I think I would honestly give this first game like a 9 out of 10. I would almost give it even a 10 out of 10. I don't even know if there's any flaws or anything I could talk about that I didn't like about it, so maybe it would be like a flawless 10 out of 10. It was fun. It was
Well,
what?
all I'll say to that is, maybe 9 out of 10 is good for you because I'm going to vaguely say that the series goes up from here.
But
So,
then doesn't it kind of go back down? It's like a hill. It's like you go
well,
up and then
yeah.
but that's later on. Yeah.
yeah.
And that makes sense. That's how Resident Evil was. But yeah, I'm trying to seriously think of a way to like, because I was like, oh, should I give it a 10 out of 10 and be cliche like that? Or that's why I said 9 out of 10. But honestly, I'm trying to think of any flaws or any issues I had with it. And I can't oh, that's sound issue. But again, that has nothing to do with the game.
Right.
Like at one point, my speaker just sounded like it was going to blow out. And then you had the same issue. It was really weird. But again, that I don't think that was the game. I don't know. That might have been a PS3 thing. I don't know. I can't think of anything I didn't like about it. I mean, maybe at some points when it was a little confusing, but again, I liked that
Right.
because there was a mystery to it, and it kind of all came together at the end. And then, of course, if I was confused at all, I had you at the end to explain things. So even that didn't bother me because a lot of times when a story's too complex for me, like in a movie or something, I'm like, oh my god, like Jacob's Ladder, which is funny because that you said that they pulled a lot of influence from that movie.
Mm-hmm.
That movie confused the fuck out of me. I should watch it again Ed and I watched it like probably a year ago or whatever. It was on Netflix or something, and I was like, oh, Dylan always told me this is good. Let's watch it. Ed really ended up liking it. I was like, I'm confused. So like, I don't know. I probably have to watch it again. And I usually don't like things that do that, but I think in this case, everything wrapped around and came together at the end. And then of course you explained any of the loose ends, so that didn't even bother me. I can't think of a flaw. The difficulty wasn't bad. The gameplay was fun. The atmosphere was great. The music was like 10. The music's definitely 10 out of 10 for me.
Mhm.
The voice acting was great. The characters were all interesting. So I really cannot think of anything I did not like about it. I was gonna be like, well, maybe we should say one thing we didn't like about it, but I really cannot think at all. So maybe it is a 10 out of 10.
For me, I'll end it on this: Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3. But now we're talking about Silent Hill, the first one.
Mhm.
I always say it's a perfect survival horror game for me.
Yes.
One of my favorite games. So yeah, so that was Silent Hill again. Maybe hopefully in the future we could talk about Silent Hill 2. But
I hope so.
in the meantime, stay tuned for our Silent Hill movie podcast,
Yes.
which hopefully should be soon.